Your time is up, Mr. Gable. This is a bank, not a shelter for failed hobbies. The words, slick and cold as the marble floor, echoed in the sterile office. Arthur Gable, 78 years old, felt the finality of that sentence settle in his bones like a winter chill. The bank manager, a young man named Peterson, whose suit probably cost more than Arthur earned in a month, leaned back in his leather chair with a smirk. He enjoyed this. "The foreclosure is final at 5 p.m. today," Peterson added, as if speaking to a child. Arthur just nodded, his throat too tight to form words, his gaze fixed on the man who was dismantling his entire life with a pen stroke. Arthur lived in a small brick house in a quiet neighborhood of Cincinnati, Ohio. It wasn't just a house, it was the home where he and his late wife, Eleanor, had built a life. The attached workshop in the back still smelled of cedar wood and oil, the scent of his craft. He was a horologist, a watchmaker, one of the last of a dying breed. His hands, now spotted with age, could still coax life into the tiniest of gears and springs. But skill didn't pay the bills that had piled up during Eleanor's long illness. The savings vanished first, then the retirement fund. The house was the last thing he had. He didn't want a handout, he just needed a small loan, a few $1,000s to purchase a rare set of antique tools and parts. A collector in Switzerland had commissioned a piece, a legacy project that would pay enough to clear his debts and let him live out his days in peace. He explained this to Mr. Peterson, laying out his business plan, showing the signed commission agreement. The manager just glanced at the papers with disdain. He saw a broke old man, not a master craftsman. He saw a bad risk, an easy number to cross off his list. So Arthur walked out of the bank that final day with the weight of complete failure on his shoulders. The city sounds seemed muffled, distant. He walked the few blocks home, each step heavier than the last. He passed neighbors who waved, but he could barely lift his hand in return. The shame was a physical thing, a hot poker in his gut. He spent the afternoon in his workshop, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 ticking clocks. He ran his fingers over the smooth, worn wood of his workbench, a bench his own father had built. He picked up a half-finished timepiece, its delicate gold gears glinting in the dusty sunlight. It was Eleanor's favorite design. He couldn't finish it now. There was no time. The hours crawled by. He packed a single cardboard box with his most precious tools, his father's loupe and a framed picture of Eleanor. The rest would be seized. The bank would sell it all for pennies on the dollar. Every tick of the grandfather clock in the hall was a countdown to his eviction. At 4:30, he knew he had to do one last thing. He had a small safe deposit box at the very same bank. Inside were Eleanor's wedding ring and a few old letters. He couldn't let the bank have those. He had to face Peterson one more time. The thought made him sick. He walked back into the bank. The air was cool and smelled of money and disinfectant. The lobby was mostly empty now, nearing closing time. He saw the janitor, a young man he'd noticed before, quietly mopping the floor in the corner. The man always had a tired but kind look in his eyes. He nodded at Arthur, a small, respectful gesture. Arthur managed a weak smile in return. He avoided looking at Peterson's office and went straight to the vault. A teller, a woman who looked at him with pity, helped him retrieve his box. He took it to a small private booth and sat down, his hands trembling. He opened the lid and stared at the meager contents of his life's treasures. He carefully wrapped the ring in a handkerchief and tucked it into his pocket along with the letters.
Closing the empty box, he felt a profound emptiness inside himself. This was it, the end of the line. He took a deep breath and stood up, preparing to walk out of the bank and into an uncertain, terrifying future. As he walked through the lobby, his path crossed directly with Mr. Peterson, who was leaving his office for the day. The manager saw Arthur and the empty safe deposit box in his hands. A cruel, triumphant smile spread across his face. "Clearing out the last of it, Gable," Peterson said, his voice loud enough for the few remaining customers and staff to hear. "Don't forget to check under the couch cushions. Sometimes people like you find loose change." The humiliation was absolute. It was a physical blow that stole Arthur's breath. He just stood there, frozen, as Peterson chuckled to himself and turned to leave. Arthur's eyes burned, but he refused to let a tear fall. He would not give this man that satisfaction. But then something happened. A quiet voice cut through the silence. "Sir?" Arthur turned. It was the janitor. He had stopped mopping and was walking towards him. The young man, whose name Arthur didn't even know, had a hesitant look on his face, but his eyes were firm. He was holding a small, crumpled envelope. "I think this is for you," the janitor said, his English heavily accented. He held out the envelope to Arthur. Peterson stopped and turned back, an annoyed look on his face, impatient with the interruption. Arthur looked at the young man, confused. "For me? I don't understand." "I see you. Many weeks. I see you are good man," the janitor said, pushing the envelope into Arthur's hands. "I clean trash. I find this. Last week. I check numbers. Is lucky." Arthur numbly opened the envelope. Inside was a lottery ticket, worn and creased. He looked at the janitor, then back at the ticket. He didn't play the lottery. It made no sense. "It's winning ticket," the young man whispered. $50,000. I have no papers, no account. For me, it is trouble. For you is hope. Please, you take it." Time seemed to stop.
Arthur stared at the piece of paper in his hand. $50,000. It wasn't millions, but it was everything. It was a miracle delivered by the hands of a man he'd never even spoken to. He looked up, and his eyes met Peterson's. The manager's face was a mask of disbelief and fury. He saw his perfect, cruel victory slipping away. He scoffed. "That's probably fake. You can't just—" But Arthur wasn't listening to him anymore. A strength he hadn't felt in years surged through him. He walked, not to the exit, but directly to the head teller's counter. The janitor, Matteo, he later learned was his name, stood back and watched, a silent guardian. "I'd like to make a payment," Arthur said, his voice clear and steady, "on the Gable property foreclosure." He endorsed the lottery ticket as the official at the counter guided him. After verification, which felt like an eternity but was only a few minutes, the funds were confirmed. The debt on his house was just over $47,000. He paid it all. Then he asked for the remaining balance in cash. With the receipt of paid in full clutched in one hand and $3,000 in the other, he walked over to Peterson, who stood there speechless and pale. Arthur didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply placed the receipt on Peterson's polished desk. At that exact moment, an older gentleman in an even nicer suit walked out of a back office. "Peterson, is there a problem out here? I heard shouting." Peterson stammered, "No, sir. Mr. Davis, no problem at all. Just a client finishing his business." Mr. Davis, the regional manager, looked from Peterson's flustered face to Arthur's calm demeanor. "This client?" he asked, turning to Arthur. "Is everything all right, sir?" Arthur looked the regional manager in the eye. "Everything is fine now," he said calmly. "I was just being told that people like me should check for loose change under the couch cushions.
Your manager here was giving me some financial advice after I paid off my home." The color drained completely from Peterson's face. Mr. Davis's expression hardened. He turned to the teller, then to another employee. "Is this true?" he asked. They both gave small, almost imperceptible nods. It turned out this wasn't the first complaint about Peterson's attitude. The regional manager's decision was swift. Peterson was fired on the spot, asked to clear his desk and be escorted from the building for gross misconduct. As a security guard led a sputtering, defeated Peterson past him, Arthur didn't feel triumph. He just felt a quiet sense of justice. Arthur's first act was not to go home. He found Mateo by his cleaning cart. He tried to give him the $3,000, but the young man refused, shaking his head vehemently. "No, sir, is gift. Good karma." Arthur knew he couldn't just walk away. The next day, he went back to the bank and got Mateo's contact information.
He visited him in his small apartment, and this time, he didn't offer money. He offered a future. He reopened his workshop. With the cloud of debt gone, he finished the commission for the Swiss collector, and he took on a new apprentice. Mateo, a man who saw value where others saw none, began learning the meticulous, beautiful art of watchmaking from a master. Arthur's home was no longer just a house. It was a school, a business, and a place of renewed hope. The workshop, once silent and dusty, was now filled with the gentle ticking of clocks and the sound of two men from different worlds working together, bound by an act of unexpected kindness. The lesson here is that our true worth is not what we have in the bank, but how we treat others, especially when they have nothing to offer us in return. A moment of compassion from someone who has little can be more powerful than all the money in the world. It can change a life, right or wrong, and remind us that goodness often comes from the most unexpected places. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care.